Why Prince Harry lashed out after his name came up in the Diddy drama.
Plus, this modern royal family hugs. How Prince William surprised one OBE recipient.
Hello and welcome to Heirs and Spares, the show where we bring you insight and opinion into the lives of two rather famous royal couples on either side of the Atlantic. I'm Kinsey Schofield, and I'll be bringing you updates on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex here in California.
And I'm Katie Nicholl, and I'll be bringing you all the latest on the Prince and the Princess of Wales right here in the UK.
Well, in the UK, you just did something amazing for Maggie's Center. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? If our
If I
readers
can move my arm, I can move my arms, Kinsey. It's just moving my legs. I'm a little sore on the legs because I ran the Hackney Half on Sunday, which is a half marathon. I have so much respect for anyone that manages to do a complete whole marathon. And I was running for Maggie's, which is a cancer care charity. It supports people all around the UK with cancer and their families. And obviously, I have my own history now with liver cancer, and I'm a big fan of the Maggie's centres. They're a wonderful organisation. The Queen is patron. So there's a lovely royal link there. And I ran for them. I raised over £4,000, which is, I don't know, like six or seven or $8,000, which is great. And I got my medal at the end of it. So I now have, it's the only medal I own. I have to
oh
say,
my
I'm
gosh. You
very
know,
proud.
if you don't plan on expanding that significantly, it would make the cutest Christmas tree ornament. I'm just throwing it out there.
I know it's the pink and purple.
Well, we've had a pretty busy last few months when it comes to the working royals. It's been so nice to see Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, out and about. You know, you've mentioned cancer. We were told at the start of this year that Catherine's Catherine was in remission, but we should be patient and manage our expectations when it comes to how often we see her. I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount we've seen her. Would you agree?
I really would. I felt the same as you, sort of at the start of the year when we were told she's going to be coming back gradually, that actually we've seen far more of her than I think we might ever have expected, both on her own and then together with Prince William, that wonderful trip just recently to the Isle of Mull and Iona up in Scotland, which was their first away trip. I think it's going to be ambitious to sort of see them do anything too long haul, too far afield. But I think that trip to Scotland, and we've got another one coming up actually next week, which I know we're going to hit on later on in the show. But I think that's just really positive, and I think it's them sending out a message that they are back to work. The princess is doing something that she is really passionate about. I was reading in the paper reports today that her early years project has now reached 500,000 people in the UK, which is a huge number. It's showing the outreach of the early years work that she does. And I think, for all of us to see her at these important events, whether that's trooping, of course, we saw her make her sort of comeback last June, just a tentative comeback, but to have seen her at the VE Day commemorations, very much front and central at the royal family, and of course with the children as well on the day of the procession and the fly past at Buckingham Palace, it sort of feels like things have gotten back to normal. Behind the scenes, of course, the princess is making sure the focus is firmly on her family and on her health, and as she said in her own words, on staying cancer free. But I think it's wonderful to see them both out. Prince William was busy last week. One of the things that he was doing was investitures, and of course, as the Prince of Wales, he very much leaned on by the King. The King can't do all of the investitures. I mean, he has the support of the Queen, and he's got the support of the Princess Royal and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. They all do it, but this investiture was really, really lovely. This was William presenting an OBE to Wendy Daunt. Now, Wendy Daunt is just a regular person. She voluntarily teaches deaf studies at the Royal School for the Deaf in Derby, and she was appointed OBE at a really lovely ceremony in Windsor. And she gave an interview to the BBC in which she talked about the experience of being presented with the OBE. And anyone that's seen an investiture knows that it is a very formal affair. And you usually see a member of the royal family presenting a medal, and the recipient bows their head or they might curtsy. And there's a sort of always there is always a formality to it. But on this occasion, Wendy Daunt asked the prince for a hug, and she had told him about her experience of Princess Diana meeting a group of deaf people and how Diana had communicated in sign language and how much that did for the deaf community in the UK. And this obviously really moved William, and they had a proper conversation. And it's not just here's your medal, off you go. There was a conversation in which she asked if he might consider getting some of their children, George possibly, to start learning sign language. And there was obviously a lovely connection between the two of them, and it ended in this sort of wonderfully warm and I think slightly unconventional moment. It's not that William isn't a hugger. I've seen him hug people before, but in that sort of formal environment at an investiture at Windsor Castle, it was unusual. And yet it just felt very warm, very natural. And I think, Kinsey, I don't know about your feeling, but certainly my feeling about the Prince of Wales is he's seamlessly stepped into this role as future king, as Prince of Wales, and he's done it. He's done it with grace and with warmth and with compassion. And I just feel like we know William so much better. We've got to know him so much better in the last couple of years, since the accession and the transition. And we're sort of understanding him better as a person. And I love it that even in this sort of formal setting, he's not afraid to let his guard down and give someone a great big hug. And it makes a great picture, and I think makes him feel all the more relatable too.
Wendy has got some moxie because she says, well, in the deaf community, we prefer hugs over handshakes. And he totally
Absolutely.
embraces that. I love that about him. Yeah, just to see this growth because you covered Prince William when I was just an observer, and there were a lot of whispers about this reluctant prince, this prince that really just was resentful of this position. And that is not, and even in some of Prince Harry's interviews, he makes it sound that way. My father and my brother are trapped. Prince William seems so grateful today. He seems so eager and just to be appreciative of the experiences that he's in. I never see a reluctant prince when whether he's dealing with homewards or whether he's at a sporting event. He just seems so confident and comfortable in his skin and in his position, which I think we should celebrate after all of those years of whispers of this person that didn't necessarily allegedly want the job.
I think there was certainly a point in his life, and when I go back to the very first book I wrote back in 2010, which was the William and Harry book, I remember speaking to people who'd spent quite a lot of their gap year with William, whether it was in Chile and then at university, and there was definitely a sense, and of course, remember he was 18, 19, 20 at the time, very much a sense, as you might expect at that young age, that he sort of wasn't ready for that burden of duty that was going to weigh very heavily on him, and slightly envious of all his undergraduates who were making exciting plans for their future. When, of course, his future was and always has been predestined and mapped out for him. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there has been not even just an acceptance, but a willingness to embrace, with an open heart, what he's got to do. And I do think the last couple of years have felt transformative in terms of his progress, his transition, his acceptance of the role that is going to come to him. We know that he's so close to his father. I mean, as his relationship with Harry has come to, to be, well, certainly with William and Harry at loggerheads, and certainly strained between Charles and Harry. The relationship between William and Charles is a very strong one. And there is just, I'm told by people who know them both, not only do they speak at least once a day on the phone, which, they never used to, they're absolutely aligned on this idea of kingship, on what monarchy is, on the fact that monarchy needs to and absolutely must continue. It's not going to fizzle out with William. It's not going to fizzle out with George. This is a dynasty that they want to continue. And I think all of that has made them very aligned and has made William very driven and duty bound. But what I love are these light-hearted moments, like I say, where you might expect formality, and yet he brings a sense of of joy and happiness and informality to the occasion, which feels totally appropriate. And I think, and it feels modern, it
Yeah.
feels different, it feels fresh. And I think in this age of monarchy, where many people might question the idea of a hereditary monarchy, that actually being real, feeling relatable, connecting to members of the public the way that they do actually makes them incredibly popular and makes people think, you know what, they're a really good thing for our country.
I I love them for your country so much so I would move just so that he could be my Prince William too. I'm glad you said that about I'm so glad you said that you talk to people that are so encouraging about the relationship between King Charles and Prince William, because I did see a story over the weekend from the Daily Beast talking about a tense the tent ceremony last week, and I'm so sorry that I'm spacing on what it was, but it was Prince William and King Charles together, and there was a ceremony, and they were talking about how there was this weirdness, this awkwardness between the two, and I just don't see that, and sometimes I wonder if that is clickbait, that there is just people are trying to find problems where there aren't problems.
I think so. I think this is the event you're talking about was the investiture in Bath. And again,
Uh,
that was a very formal occasion. They're all in their robes, they're sort of suited and booted. And possibly that formality might have translated as perhaps a slight coolness. But actually that's really not the case. Father and son, I think, well, I know are closer than ever. I mean, this is not to say that there aren't sometimes differences of opinions and fallouts, and I mean that's inevitable, but they are very much aligned. And I think ironically, with Harry having sort of drifted so far from the family, it's actually made William and his father a much tighter unit. And of course, Catherine is a part of that unit too. And speaking of the princess, we're going to see both William and Catherine back in Scotland actually next week. They're going to be going aboard a frigate, a military vessel, the Royal Navy's HMS Glasgow. And we've only just had a trip to Scotland, so to have another one within a matter of weeks is wonderful for the people of Scotland. I'm sure they're going to get a great turnout, and I think it's also quite significant that this is falling in half term. Now, usually the family go to Norfolk, and I understand that will be the plan for next week. But it's quite interesting, and as I say, quite significant that William and Catherine are allowing what will essentially be a full day to be scheduled into what would ordinarily be very precious family time. And I think it's also worth just pointing out, Kinsey, if I may, that when they were up in Scotland last time, it coincided with their wedding anniversary again, a date that's always been really personal and really private to them, in which they've celebrated privately. And to go back to your point at the start of our conversation, where you were talking about how wonderful it's been to see them out and back, I think they're really taking advantage of the fact that Catherine is doing so well, that she's feeling so fit and so well, and a date has clearly fallen in their calendar where ordinarily they'd probably be, huddled down in Norfolk and enjoying family time. But on this occasion, they've made that time available in their diaries. So, again, another away trip.
I love this, the idea of this trip visually because it reminds me so much of young Queen Elizabeth. I think a lot of the time when I imagine young Queen Elizabeth on engagements, there's the obvious just waving to a crowd, but
Mm.
the christening of a ship, that
Yes.
visual is so thrilling. And the idea of Catherine doing something similar to what we used to see Queen Elizabeth do in her
Absolutely.
prime.
Yeah.
It's so fun to imagine.
Well, there are many pictures and many images and film, as you say, of the late Queen Elizabeth. I mean, it basically a naming ceremony involves a bottle, and in this case, I think it's going to be a bottle of whiskey because it's Scotland, being launched against the vessel, against the hull, and that is the official naming ceremony. And as you say, I think that's something that we so associate with that older generation of royals. And, you know, William has gone out of his way, I know in the past, to sort of say he doesn't want to be an ornamental royal. And more recently, he said he sees himself as a royal with a small r rather than a capital R. And I think that's all about feeding into this narrative that him and Catherine are playing out about being modern royals. And yet what's so lovely is that they have such a respect for the past and traditions and ceremonies, such as the one that we will see next week up in Glasgow, that, they're more than happy to do it. They want to go above and beyond ribbon cutting, the opening of the unveiling of plaques, that sort of traditional royal work. But they still do that as well. And so I think it's that high idea really of, isn't it, of getting the balance absolutely right. And as I say, paying respect to past traditions, from decades ago, that you'll sit there and watch that and think, oh gosh, I remember Queen Elizabeth doing that, and so will many others. And I think that sense of continuity and longevity and tradition is absolutely fundamental to the royal family and its success.
It's a PR, like no brainer too. So I love yeah, I love when it's even down to the jewelry they wear. Sometimes Catherine will wear earrings or a brooch, and then you sit there and you get lost in the internet, the rabbit hole of everyone that wore that brooch and how they styled it, and you immediately associate Catherine with these other women, strong women that you loved. It's incredibly clever. I have to assume it's done on purpose, but they put her in some of these positions where automatically my heart melts because I'm reminded of Queen Elizabeth in her younger years, or I'm reminded of Princess Diana fiercely taking a red carpet. And it's just incredibly clever. And the way they do it tends to be more subtle than some attempt to do it here in the States.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I don't think any of it is, some of it is probably coincidental, but I think more often than not, it is all quite carefully considered, whether it comes to wearing a similar dress, wearing a piece of jewelry that has real history attached to it or sentimental meaning attached to it. It's all there being communicated in a message because, of course, we don't hear the royals speak very often. I mean, we are hearing them speak far more often now than we ever used to. But certainly in Queen Elizabeth's time, that was a way of communicating and sending out a message.
Well, let's jump on over to the spares section of Heirs and Spares and visit with Prince Harry. So, over the weekend, some court documents revealed that Prince Harry claimed front page stories and other articles had hugely negatively impacted his mental health as well as Meghan's and the children's. And this is associated with a Sun front page printing a story about Prince Harry linked to P. Diddy. And Harry's team actually accused the Sun of doing this out of revenge over some litigation. And of course, the Sun and the umbrella team denies, and they deny that this was ever done out of revenge. And they claim that they were just reporting what was in this initial, I want to say these court documents initially from Rodney Jones. And really all Rodney Jones was saying, and I have to tell you, I do sympathize with Prince Harry here. Rodney Jones in this court document, he's suing Diddy for, this is one of many Diddy suits. He's suing Diddy for abuse. And he lists off categories of the type of high profile people Diddy was hanging out with to give him credibility in the industry. And he talks about athletes and he talks about movie stars, but then he specifically says Prince Harry's name. While he just categorizes all of these other high profile people, he specifically says Prince Harry's name. And you know what? That's just the way that journalism works. If Prince Harry singled out, that's the name that everybody's going to use. And we're finding this out now because of these court documents that were released. I have to stress there's no proof Prince Harry has spoken to Diddy in years, as far as I know. The last picture I think of the two of them together was at the Princess Diana concert. And I did a lot of media at the time saying, I don't think that these two have anything to do with each other today. I think this is unfortunate. But at the end of the day, Rodney's trying to prove that Diddy uses these high profile individuals to give him credibility and to attract other high profile individuals. Look, this person hangs out with me. You should want to hang out with me too.
Yeah.
But it doesn't accuse Prince Harry of anything.
And
And
he, just to stress, he's not been accused of
yeah,
anything. Just being
yeah.
linked to someone via a party or a meeting means, does not suggest there is an affiliation, as you say. Um, Given that this is such a controversial and damaging case, of which, there are many high-profile names being dragged into it, you can understand Prince Harry, wanting to be kept as far away from this story as possible. I think we would all agree with that. I think, perhaps on a subtext level, it's Harry feeling that the media are always out to get him. That there is this vendetta. We know he feels that way. We know he's not our greatest fan, is something of an understatement. But again, I think this sort of fuels that whole idea that he just thinks the British press is out to get him, out to get Meghan, and out to make his life as miserable as possible.
So you covered celebrities for a significant amount of time too. And I kept thinking about this over the last few days. Again, this is Diddy related. Justin Bieber recently came out within the last, I think at the end of last week, and said nothing has ever happened between him and Diddy. He was not abused by Diddy. But that's after months and months and months of speculation that something did happen. And I was grateful that because I'd been defending him, saying I don't think that whatever's going on with Justin Bieber has anything to do with Diddy. We've got to stop this. But it's almost like if you wait too long to say something, and this is the difficult conversations that I'm sure happen at the palace. Never complain, never explain. 99.9% of the time works. But when it comes to something like this, sometimes the damage it's already been done. And with Justin Bieber and Diddy, I thought, man, after 6 months or more of allowing those whispers to take place, allowing people to ask me about it on TV, well, could this have anything to do with Diddy? No, it has not. Justin's having a bad day. That's why he's yelling at the paparazzi. Um,
Yeah.
but when it comes to uh, Harry's comments about it affecting his mental health, his wife's and his children, we're only finding out about this because of court documents that have been made available. Sometimes do you think that they do need to prioritize stepping up and saying, no, I really want nothing to do with this, especially when it comes to this nasty trial?
I do, and I think when you consider what's happened with Prince Andrew and the affiliation with Epstein and everything else, it's more often than not, it's the case that if nothing is said, then rumors, speculation, very damaging speculation, is allowed to sort of germinate and turn and spin into a narrative all of its own. So, look, I agree with you that for the most part, Never Complain, Never Explain has worked for the palace, and I think it continues to work for the palace. So I think when it's something that's potentially really very damaging, um, and I think we saw this post Oprah with the whole allegation of racism with the royal family, that really unusual situation where Prince William, when asked by a member of the press pack, are you a racist family? Ordinarily that sort of question wouldn't even be dignified with a response. And yet he stopped and he looked back and he addressed that reporter and looked down the camera and said, we are not a racist family. And I think that was William seeing the potential for this narrative, which had, gone across the world, this story that had gone across the world to really be hugely damaging. And so I think there are occasions when actually just to stamp it out, to nip it in the bud before it has any chance to grow and become very damaging is not a bad strategy.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And I'm surprised that we're talking about Diddy and the royal family and, in the same sentence. Again, it's happening because I feel like it just had too much room to breathe. But talking about Never Complain, Never Explain, this is my last question to you. Thank you so much for your time today. We found out, I believe it was earlier last week, that Prince Harry's African Parks charity, there was a third party investigation, Sherry Blair's team, and they confirmed multiple abuses following that investigation. They won't tell us specifics. We've heard examples given to us by the Mail on Sundays investigation, and even I believe the Daily Beast have done separate reporting, Newsweek, but they are keeping this similar to the bully report at Buckingham Palace. They're keeping this investigation sealed. is this another example of Prince Harry, step up, say that they've got to change course. You can't be quiet when it comes to some of these allegations and the fact that they did find that some of them were true. There, to me, there's too many questions lingering. What is true? Did a woman lose her baby? Was someone attacked? Or is there waterboarding? I
Well,
think.
he
Go
may well be being advised by his legal team at this stage not to say anything. I mean, we don't know what legal counsel he's getting, and therefore, if he's being told legally, don't say anything yet. While this investigation is ongoing, it's best to not say anything. And I think that's probably good advice. I just think, on a sort of broader spectrum, for there to be controversy over the African Parks, which is a charity that Harry's always worked so closely with, so soon after him and Prince Sezo stepping away from Centre Bali. It's like these sort of blocks of his philanthropic work are just are crumbling, and I feel quite sorry for him in that respect, because this was the sort of amazing work that he did, that I applauded, that I've written about so many times over the years, that I know he was genuinely passionate about and loved giving his all to, and now both are mired in controversy with, really damaging allegations being leveled against different factions within those charities.
Do you think he should step down from African Parks Charity, or do you think that he can help change the direction?
Well, I think it depends on the severity of the allegations, what the investigation concludes, and I think probably he's just sitting and watching at the moment.
Well, it has been, I'd love to know what they determined. Unfortunately, all they will say is that they found that there was abuses, and they won't elaborate on that. But I understand that they're trying to protect themselves. And it's got to be a difficult time for
Mm.
everyone. But you're right. There's this the never complain, never explain. It seems so simple, but there have to be debates inside the House of Windsor sometimes as to how they deal with these things.
And I think it's also just worth concluding with the point that, when it comes to Prince Harry, anything that potentially is going to be damaging for his brand, damaging for his reputation, I think he will be inclined to step away if he has to just keep his brand, keep his reputation, you know, whiter than white. I mean, that's really important, as particularly being in Hollywood, and where he is based with so much commercially riding on it. He can't afford to have that sort of reputational damage as a result of a charity that he's closely involved with. So it'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely. Well, Katie Nicholl, thank you so much for your time today. It was so great to see you. Congratulations on your run. I mean, that is a pretty this is one of those bucket list moments. You've checked something huge off of your list. So
Good.
congratulations on your success. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I will see you very soon.
Thank you all.